Okay everyone, I'm going to go over the CX TabKit software and some of the usability changes that I made to it. First of all, this is a proprietary software. The company that owns it was nice enough to let me talk a little bit about it and show you an up-close screenshot of it. So the scope of the project was to make the interface more usable. It's built on the Tritium Niagara AX platform, so we don't have a lot of control over most of the usability and the interface here. The tree over here on the left is part of the Tritium. All of the stuff at the top is part of the Tritium. This center section is the only part that we had control over. So the first thing that I did was I sat down with some of the engineers, since this is an engineering piece of software, and they went through the software and showed it to me, showed me how it worked, how they use it, some of their complaints, stuff like that. I took note of things that they said and just observed. I did this for quite a while, asking questions, getting clarification on how they work, their process, just learning everything about them and their business. At that point, I started to come up with wireframes and prototypes. I used Adobe Illustrator for that, just building out this center section here, and the prototype ended up looking basically identical to this. One thing that wasn't in the original design was this box here that says progress. That's a new feature that I came up with. After talking to the engineers, I had determined that this was the main hub of their project, and so I figured it to be the most important part of the software, and my goal the whole time was to make it so that they didn't want to use this tree over here on the left. In the past, that's the main way they had of navigating, and that's what they had learned, and so that was the user's favorite way to navigate through the software, and I didn't feel like it was that usable, and I knew that, a good test of whether I succeeded on making it, guiding them through the process, through the software, and making it more usable would be if I could get them to break their habit of using this tree over here. So the next thing that I did was I started came up with the wireframe and the prototype. I showed the wireframe and the prototype to them and got their feedback on it, and they seemed to really like it. I did make sure that, things like this progress bar were feasible and that we could do that. The main thing you have to remember about this particular project is I was the only one doing the user interface, so I didn't have really anyone to bounce ideas off of, and it's a small project. There's less than 20 users that use this, so we didn't have a big budget for testing, A/B testing. We could not, it was not in the scope of the project to move it off of the Tritium platform, which is something I would have liked to have done to have more control over the usability, but that wasn't in the scope. So it was very informal. It was basically just I would make a change, and obviously if the users had complaints about it, I would hear about it, but it was very informal, and I just kind of had to watch, listen, and learn and see where they were having problems and kind of judge from there, based on that feedback, if the project was successful, if what I was doing here was making a difference. Some of the main, things that I did was try to make it consistent, obviously. If this symbol here under quick links in the center represents a fan, then it's always going to represent a fan. If the calculator represents calculations, it's always going to represent calculations. I used color to indicate status of things, like the incompletes are red, the completes are green. I disabled buttons if they weren't valid. If the user was going to get an abrupt error message or not get the result that they were hoping for when they clicked that button, then I tried to disable that button or prevent that from happening. Things that are not included in the project at this point are, not able to be accessed. Basically, there's the information architecture of this software was really kind of already laid out. Again, I didn't really have any control over that. It was already set, and I didn't really get a chance to change that too much. And it wasn't terrible, but where I could eliminate steps and create links throughout the software that were that would make a better experience, I tried to do that, using the knowledge that I had about the software, about the users. That's really any kind of software that, any kind of design problem that I approach is always thinking about the user, what it's trying to communicate, and its purpose, and then going from there and using the information that I have in evaluating what the best solution to that problem is. In this case, I spent time with the engineers and learning about the users and what they liked and didn't like and how they used it. I also pulled upon human-computer interaction knowledge that I already had. I listened to stories and complaints of users when it comes to computers and software and the internet and websites all the time, and so I kind of take all that knowledge into consideration when making choices. In this case, we didn't have a good way to really evaluate whether it was successful or not, but being the scope of the project, how informal it was, and the size of it, and the feedback that I received would tell me that it was successful. I heard many users of the software say that they did like the changes that were made, and they did find this, especially this hub here, to be a better form of navigating throughout the software versus this tree, what they had been doing before. So in all of that taken into consideration, I would say that this was a successful project. I would have liked to have been able to go further with it, but that didn't work out, so that's about all I've got on this. If you have any questions about it or about my process or anything like that, feel free to contact me on the contact page, and feel free to browse around the rest of the portfolio, and I'll talk to you later.